And we are back talking about a nation divided over immigration, joined now by the chair of the Immigration Task Force for the Democratic Caucus, Illinois Congressman Luis Gutierrez, and Republican senatorial candidate for the state of Arizona, former Congressman from Arizona, J.D. Hayworth. Welcome, both of you. You've been debating this for years, even on this program, and yet we still don't have comprehensive reform. We do this week, however, Congressman, have news from the administration. They are going to send down 1,200 additional National Guard troops to the southwest border. You have called this soundbite-driven politics. Does it make any difference to send all those troops down there?
I think in the absence of a holistic approach to comprehensive immigration reform, it really isn't going to solve the problem. I think you've probably been to a graduation or two. So have I. We know that thousands of those students that come here on student visas aren't going home. It's summer. We see all the tourists here in Washington, D.C. We know that thousands of those tourists aren't going home. We know that there are workers that come here on temporary work permits. We know they're not all going home. 40% of all the undocumented workers, our undocumented population, came here legally to this country and have overstayed their visas. So even if you shut down the border, it isn't going to answer the total question. So what I'm proposing is that we look at it from a holistic perspective. All right, well, I understand the frustration at the border. I understand that the border is a necessary component, but in and of itself doesn't solve the problem.
You're in a tough primary fight with John McCain, Senator McCain, who wants 6,000 additional troops down at the border. I mean, if you look at this dispatch from the Washington Post today, the first paragraph talks about 687 illegal immigrants in a 24-hour period last week. Is 1,200 enough? Is it neither here nor there in terms of a response?
Let me begin on the point of unanimity, because this is a contentious question. I know we all want to pause and give thanks for those who gave the last full measure of devotion this Memorial Day weekend. And because this is a question of national security, I think this notion of 1,200 guardsmen is woefully inadequate. When you go back and check the press accounts, we hear that actually the president of Mexico and the government of Mexico, not content on lecturing the state of Arizona and the majority of American citizens from a joint session of Congress, now instructed the State Department, hey, if you're sending people there, don't have them enforce immigration laws. So what we are seeing right now is a situation where you will have troops essentially working to maintain Border Patrol vehicles, change oil, change tires, or work in the office dealing with computers. This is cosmetic. It is ineffective because 1,200 guardsmen across 4 states, do the math, that's 300 guardsmen per state.
But from your point of view, then, is it simply a question of how many troops? Would more be better?
Absolutely. Okay. And like the book I wrote years ago, whatever it takes, the numbers necessary. Look, we are dealing with a national security crisis here, not just Mexicans coming across the border.
Well, but let's look at it in the bigger context. This was a scene in Phoenix where you live. A massive protest. There were expected on order of 20,000 protesters yesterday protesting the Arizona law, protesting in favor of a more comprehensive approach. And that's my question for both of you. And Congressman Hayworth, I'll start with you. How do you talk about securing the border only and not deal with this in a comprehensive way, dealing with the fact that you've got two things, some 12 million illegal immigrants in the country, and a culture in America where we're once saying, stop at the border, but please keep coming because we need the labor?
No, I would challenge a couple of points with the premise of your question. But first of all, Americans understand that comprehensive immigration reform is a poll-tested phrase that essentially means amnesty. People want to see the laws enforced. To paraphrase Mr. Justice Brandeis, when the government itself supports lawlessness, you end up with anarchy. And the fact is, we need not only to enforce the border, we need interior enforcement. And let's take it away from the border for a second, David, to the major cities in the Northeast. For example, in New York City, a policy was adopted called the broken windows theory of policing, where you enforce the law for infractions no matter how seemingly minor. And as a result, overall crime drops. Now, the sad fact is, Luis, and I've got it documented in the book, said he didn't like the term amnesty because it applied forgiveness. We've appeared in different forums, and to this day, Luis has never answered the question. Do you believe crossing the border, Luis, is not an illegal act when it's on the books that, in fact, it is illegal?
Well, but the question, I don't think it's a question that it's illegal. It's also a matter of practicality and political will. Are you going to start deporting 12 million people back? There's never been the political will to do that. But answer the question, Congressman. whatever this congressman says about whether that's just a poll-tested phrase, there is such a thing as comprehensive immigration reform that deals with a legal path to citizenship for those who are already here, reflecting the fact that you can't just deport 12 million people back to Mexico. How do you secure one without pursuing the other?
First of all, what you need is a comprehensive approach to it. Because here's what I say. We have a magnet. They're jobs. So listen, I got a driver's license. It has my photo on it. I have a passport. When I go in and out of the country, the government swipes that passport, and it says, okay, Luis, you're ready to come in. You're authorized. Why can't we have a Social Security card with a picture on it? So when you go get a job, you swipe it. And if employers don't use that card issued by the government to authorize you before you go to work, we send those employers to jail. So we can be tough and stop the magnet of the jobs. But at the same time, let's be realistic. My friend JD simply wants them to disappear, as though this is the latest installment of a Harry Potter series. They're not going to disappear. They have deep roots in their communities. They're here. So what I want to do is be fair and practical at the same time, and resolve the issue of the undocumented status of workers here in this country. What I'd like to do, because is simply do this. That little girl, that little second grade girl, who asked the First Lady, what about my mommy and her papers? I want to say to that mother, come and register with the government. Go through a background check. Pay a fine. Go to the back of the line. Learn English. Make sure you learn all about our country. Be the best American worker you can be so that you can raise the best American citizen child. And when that young little second grader is an adult, she can say, my country stood by my mother, by me, and cherished our family and our family values.
Here's the Arizona law reflected a lot of frustration in Arizona, in the government, that federal laws were not being enforced to stop the flow across the border, which I alluded to just a moment ago. And here's a political reality. We put our recent poll up on the screen. 61% of those polled support that law. Do you understand the frustration in Arizona?
Absolutely. And their frustration is that the federal government has not assumed its rightful and obligatory responsibility to have our immigration laws enforced in this country. But if you ask those same people, well, do you agree with Luis that we should go after employers and make sure that they go to jail if they hire undocumented workers? They say yes. Do you agree with Luis that we should charge those people a fine and make them right with the law and make sure that they learn English and that we bring them? If you ask those same people, are you frustrated with the immigration laws? Do you really think this is going to reduce crime? They tell you, no, we really don't think it's going to reduce crime. Right. What we really want to do is send a message to the federal government. They sent the message. I understand their frustration. Their frustration is real. But what I don't want to allow is to continue to exploit that frustration, right, with simple sound bites and not give a solution. I have a solution that will solve the undocumented status of people here in this country and illegal immigration.
The big issue, we both got our copy of the bill, and make no mistake, I have read it, okay, and we can go through that.
Version, I've got the Senate
okay, well, I've got both, actually, right in front of me,
Okay.
and I know about the amendments from one to the other. The big issue here, let's get right into the center of it. Is this an invitation for racial profiling? And we can both turn, because I'm sure you'll quote it if I don't, to the relevant section, which is that basically, I'm paraphrasing here, a police officer may not consider race, color, or national origin in the enforcement of this section, except to the extent permitted by the United States or Arizona Constitution. It's right there in the law. It says no profiling. But let me ask you a practical question. If you're driving down the street in Phoenix and you're going too fast and a cop pulls you over, and if you're doing the same and a cop pulls you over, what else are they going to look at besides the fact that he's Hispanic to ask him whether he has his papers and he's here legally?
Now, David, you set up a situation. Let's talk about the commonality of the experience. First of all, Luis and I are remarkably safe drivers, but we're dealing with a hypothetical here. If we were pulled over for speeding, the first request from a law enforcement professional would be to see our license, registration, and proof of insurance. Now, in some overheated political rhetoric, some people are saying, oh, they're asking for your papers. The fact is, and I'll quote right back to you what it says at the conclusion of the Senate bill, this act shall be implemented in a manner consistent with federal laws regulating immigration, protecting the civil rights of all persons, and respecting the privileges and immunities of United States citizens. What has happened here is there has been a concerted effort to shift this from a question of enforcement, which is a sound public policy priority we should have, it has now been changed. They're trying to shift this to a question of ethnicity and ethnic profiling, thinking there is some political benefit to be gained. That is not the case.
So
and I believe law enforcement
no
professionals
risk of
will do well.
profiling, as you heard the congressman talk about?
Here's what's going to happen. The fact is that Latinos have lived in the state of Arizona before it was the state of Arizona. There are families that go back generation after generation. And yes, it is Memorial Day tomorrow. And here's what's going to happen. There's going to be a group of guys that are going to play the soccer game. They're going to be coming home. Someone calls on the phone and says, there's a disturbance. And they're going to ask somebody, do you have your documents? Well, hey, I was out playing soccer, so I didn't bring my papers with me. But by the way, I served in Afghanistan. I served in Iraq. And because of that, they expedited my citizenship papers. Can you come by my house so I can show? Will that do? That's what's going to happen. You're going to ask men and women who have served this nation for their papers merely because of the color of their skin. They paid the highest price. They paid the highest tax. They've shown their devotion, their love for this country. And this country should do nothing to set them apart and to distinguish them as a criminal element. And that's the practicality of what's going to happen. Look, the fact is that the Latino community feels besieged upon. It feels as though the finger point is against them, that somehow they're a criminal element. But that's not new. Look, there have been distinctions. The Germans in Pennsylvania, the